Welcome to the Life You Crave. Simple and sustainable weight loss for women who have better things to do than diet. I'm your host, Lia Pinnelli. I help ambitious, badass women stop overeating, overworking, and overgiving to lose weight from a place of love. I'll help you simplify weight loss, end your overwhelm, and create the life you crave. If you like what you hear, please like and subscribe to this podcast. Let's get started. Hello, my femmes. Here at the Life You Crave podcast, we are re-releasing some of our greatest hits, podcasts from our show that have had the most downloads, the most popularity. We wanted to re-release them here so that they would be right at the top of your podcast feed so that you can dive in and enjoy all summer long. And if you haven't already, please head over to Facebook and find me, Lia Pinnelli, and join our Life You Crave community there. It is our podcast community where we are expanding on what you are learning on the episode, diving deeper, building community, and having a lot of fun. So come on over to Lia Pinnelli over at Facebook and join my Life You Crave community there. Can't wait to see you. I used to feel addicted to sugar. Any of you out there relate to that one? I tell this story a lot about when I had a little toddler and I was working a lot in a leadership position of a big high school. And I would come home and, I would have my baby that I hadn't seen all day and, dinner and all of those responsibilities. And I'll never forget, every night I would be washing the dishes and I kept the dark chocolate Trader Joe's peanut butter cups in the cabinet right above the sink. And I would eat, I have no idea how many, somewhere probably between 5 and, dare I say 10, every night while I was doing the dishes. And every night I would swear to myself that this is the last night. This is the last night. Tomorrow night, I'm not going to have any sugar. I'm not going to have any sugar. I knew that I didn't need the sugar. The sugar wasn't adding anything nutrient-wise to my life or my body, but it was just so hard to get through the dishes without that little boost of pleasure from those dark chocolate-covered peanut butter cups. And at the time of this recording, we are heading into the holiday season. And by the time you listen to this recording, it will be January 2nd. And if you're anything like me, you will have eaten more sugar than usual because the holidays are full, right, of lots and lots of special treats that we want to enjoy, but we also don't want to feel out of control. And I did feel out of control with sugar. Not that I was necessarily binging. Sometimes when we say that you feel out of control, people think you mean like you're like this ravenous monster that just is, stuffing your face. And that's not what I mean. I wasn't a ravenous monster. It's just that I couldn't get through a day without sugar, without sweets. And I knew, like I said, that it was unnecessary. So I would try all kinds of things to avoid the sugar. I would try eating, lots and lots of fruit or drinking coffee or tea. But eventually I couldn't resist and I would just give in. And even though it made me feel kind of crappy after, like sugar doesn't really, when you've overeaten sugar, it doesn't feel good in your mouth, on your teeth, make me feel a little sick, but I would eat it anyway. And again, that cycle would continue where I would swear that I wouldn't eat it the next day. And by 2 p.m., sure enough, I was popping chocolate-covered almonds in my mouth to get through the day. I would feel so disappointed with myself. And I would say things to myself like, why can't I just follow through? Why did this feel so hard? Despite me having done other really hard things in my life, like have a baby, like be a full-time working mom. I thought I just needed more self-control. That was what I always thought. I just need more self-control. I just need more self-discipline. I just need more willpower. But it turned out I didn't need more of any of that. I had plenty of self-control and self-discipline and willpower. After all, you don't get through schools like UC Berkeley and Stanford at the top of your class, by the way, without self-control and discipline and willpower. What I really needed to break my sugar habit was I needed to understand my brain. I needed to understand why I was having these strong cravings in the first place and why it felt so out of my control to stop. And then, and only then, could I solve the problem from there using brain-based solutions, because our brains are what are driving our actions every time. So that's exactly what I did. Today, I have a very satisfying and peaceful relationship with sugar. I do eat sugar on occasion, but I don't crave it like I used to. And I didn't need any more self-control or willpower to get to where I am today. So today, January 2nd, 2023, although whenever you listen to this is the perfect time, I'm going to teach you how I did it and how you can do it too. This is a 2-part series that I'm recording here called Breaking Up But Staying Friends with Sugar. And I'm going to teach you the brain-based approach that I used to break up with sugar. And I also want to invite you to not do this alone, but we can do this together. If you are listening to this anytime between January 2nd and January 13th, we are running a free challenge. And you can sign up for that challenge at liapinnelli.com/sugar. Or go to Facebook and check out the Facebook group, Break Up with Sugar 2023. This is a free challenge where I'm actually going to teach you step by step exactly how to break your sugar habit and also understand how you can reintroduce sugar into your life after you've broken your sugar habit so that you don't have to abstain from sugar forever. So go check that out. I'll be talking more about that in the episode today. Let's dive in. The first thing I want you to really understand is when you break up with sugar, you will find, as I did, that there is so much peace and freedom on the other side of your sugar habit. You can still enjoy sugar. Most of us can still enjoy sugar without jonesing for it. And that is awesome. That is amazing. I also just want to honor here that some people don't feel like they can enjoy sugar at all, and they do choose to abstain from sugar, and I just want to respect that. And if that's you, what you're going to hear today on the podcast and what you're going to learn in my free challenge, my free Facebook challenge, Break Up with Sugar 2023 with Lia Pinnelli, it will help you too, whether you are trying to give up sugar forever or just have a better, more peaceful, healthier relationship with sugar. This challenge is going to help you with both. So here is what I really want you to know from the outset. If you want to break your sugar habit, then you must use a brain-based approach. Why? Well, the reason why you have to use a brain-based approach is because just like me, you have to understand why you're feeling out of control in the first place in order to solve the problem. If you don't understand why the problem is occurring, it's pretty hard to solve it. So I'm going to give you a teeny tiny little neuroscience lesson, and we're going to use that lesson as our launch pad to really understand how to solve the problem of having a habit that we want to break. There is this beautiful neurotransmitter that is released in your brain. It is called dopamine, and dopamine is our friend. Dopamine is a good thing. Dopamine is sometimes called it's in the reward center of your brain, and it's sometimes called the craving hormone. Dopamine is designed to release in your brain automatically. You can't control it, right? It's going to release automatically anytime you do something that we are hardwired to do in order for us to procreate, to keep our human race alive. I'll give you an example of this. Dopamine is released anytime you eat, right? And of course, we need to eat in order to stay alive. Dopamine is released anytime you experience any kind of pleasure, whether that be in the pleasure of, actual procreating. That is why Mother Nature coupled procreation, and I'm obviously being heteronormative here, but it actually applies to everyone. But that's why Mother Nature coupled procreation with pleasure so that we would continue to do it. So we are hardwired to do things that feel good. And dopamine is that feel-good hormone. It is released whenever you do something that feels good so that you will continue to do it, so that you will actually crave it, and therefore you will motivate to go and do it. The tricky thing is the more sugar that's in something, the bigger dopamine hit you get. So we could use the example of a raspberry bush. Back in the day, hunter-gatherer societies, we might be out foraging for, plants and berries and things like that. And we come upon a raspberry bush. Well, that raspberry bush has super sweet, delicious raspberries on it. So you start to gather those raspberries and you're, gathering the raspberries and you're popping a few in your mouth as you go. And your brain is hardwired to remember the dopamine is released. And the dopamine is actually, it will help your brain to map out all of the circumstances that were at play when you found this raspberry bush. So, which way did you turn on the pathway? What time of day was it? Your brain is this amazingly sophisticated software that is recording everything that happened up until the moment that dopamine was released so that you can repeat it, so that we can procreate, so that humans can stay alive on the planet for as long as possible. We are hardwired, biologically speaking. So when you eat something sweet like raspberries, you are going to get a nice dopamine hit. And when you eat anything, really, you're going to get a dopamine hit. But the sweeter a thing is, the more dopamine some of us get. Well, when you introduce processed foods, these foods are, I don't want to say unnaturally sweet, but they're abnormally sweet. Because humans, being these, super smart people that we are, we have figured out ways to make food irresistible. And it makes a lot of food companies very, very, very rich. But we won't go into that here. What you need to understand is that our dopamine will rise and fall. The quantity of dopamine that's released is often relative to what you are consuming. So for me, eating those dark chocolate peanut butter cups at night, I was getting a big, good dose of dopamine in that moment that felt really good. And that was a great thing because I didn't feel really good before I had the dopamine. I was exhausted and I was washing dishes and I wanted some pleasure in that moment. There was nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not imagining it. You don't need more self-control or willpower. What you need is to understand why this is happening in the first place and why it does feel out of your control. Because remember, just like that raspberry bush, my brain was mapping everything I was doing in that circumstance before I got those dark chocolate covered peanut butter cups. So my brain started to associate or hardwire the habit of washing dishes with chocolate covered peanut butter cups. So now my brain is expecting it. So now every time I go to wash dishes, guess what happens? My brain starts to release the dopamine. Dopamine is actually released before you've even gotten the super pleasureful thing, because the dopamine is designed to make you crave the thing so that you'll go and get it and eat it and survive. It's just that in our modern world, the dark chocolate covered peanut butter cups are not exactly something I would have found hanging from a tree back in the day when I was a hunter-gatherer. So this is where the imbalance begins. And it's not unique to me that I would have these strong sugar cravings in the evening. I remember I had a client, her name was Laura. I loved Laura. I still love Laura. But she had the same exact habit as me, but with Skittles, right? Skittles was her thing. She'd get the kids to bed and, next thing she knew, she was in the kitchen breaking out the bag of Skittles, that I think she also kept in a tall cupboard somewhere. Evenings are the hardest for a reason. Evenings are the hardest because we are hardwired to avoid discomfort and we are hardwired to seek pleasure. And for most of us, especially if you are a professional, high-achieving, working mother, you are exhausted in the evening and on the weekends. And so the pattern gets built. Exhaustion starts to get coupled, neurologically speaking, starts to get coupled with the habit starts to form of I'm exhausted, I'm going to eat something sweet. I'm bored, I'm going to eat something sweet. So this is how your brain works. It just becomes subconscious on some level. And then when you're like, wait a minute, I have this habit that I didn't even realize I was creating. And I'm eating these chocolate covered peanut butter cups every night, or I'm eating the Skittles every night. I don't want this habit. I want to break this habit, but it feels impossible to break. And that is because you've now built a neural pathway in your brain that is associating exhaustion with the sweets. So your brain's like, we got to have it. We're exhausted. What else are we going to do? Everything else sounds horrible compared to getting those sweets. So what does this have to do with the holidays? I think is pretty obvious, but I just want to highlight that the holidays are when we can, so many people I know are like, oh yeah, I gave up sugar for a week, a month, a year, whatever. But then a lot of times for a lot of us, we'll either reintroduce that habit over the holidays, but for more of us, we actually just reinforce that habit and increase the habit over the holidays. And that's for obvious reasons as well. I mean, literally at the time of this recording, I'm sitting here in my office and I have over in the office our holiday stash. And when I say stash, it's just I've set it aside for the holidays coming up because I'm recording this on December 13th. But we have peppermint bark. We have Italian cookies. We have the Turkish delights. We have C's candies. I mean, we have candy and cookies and cakes up the wazoo right here in my office, right? Because they're not in the kitchen because they're not available yet to my family. But my point is that the actual quantity and exposure to sweets is higher during the holidays. And so if you're somebody who eats sweets and you have more access to sweets more often during the holidays, not to mention the holidays can bring a lot of stress for folks, which stress is often coupled with sugar for a lot of us in terms of the habit and the association. But just the sheer prevalence of sweets over the holidays will not only activate an old habit that maybe you've been great at breaking, but it can also increase that habit. So maybe, before the holidays, you would have, sweets a few times a week, but all of a sudden over the holiday season, you're having sweets every single day because, for me, it's like, my favorite Kringle. I love Kringle. Panettone is really popular in my family, or, the Italian cookies, all these things. I'm like, I only get this once a year. So the next thing you know, you are increasing your sugar intake. And subconsciously, you don't even realize this is happening, but your brain loves patterns. Your brain loves subconscious habits because they are very low energy for your brain. Your brain's like, this is great. I'm getting a huge dopamine hit from this thing. So let's just keep doing this, right? And the next thing you know, you have developed a really strong habit that you swear you're going to break in January. But then January comes and you know what happens? It feels really hard to break the habit. And that is not because you don't have self-control or willpower or self-discipline. It's because your brain has built an association that to decouple that, to decouple that association requires a very, very intentional intervention. And that is what I'm going to share with you today. The way that you break a sugar habit, just like the way you break any habit, is you have to actually interrupt the pattern. And when I say the pattern, I'm talking about the psychological, neurological pattern that your brain has set up. Our brains love patterns. So in order to break a pattern, we have to intentionally interrupt the pattern. Now, let me be clear here that for all of you who have tried to do this in the past, and you're like, yeah, I always try to break the pattern. I try to stop the habit. I try to eat healthy. That's why people start diets in January, join gyms in January, do all this January stuff, is because we are intent on changing. Transformation is so important. We want to be free from this habit. We want to be free from carrying unwanted weight. We want to be free from worrying about our health or diabetes or not being strong or not being able to get off the floor after you're playing with your kids or grandkids. We want these things so badly. So we know we need to change. But let me just tell you that change requires interrupting the pattern. And over the holiday season is when we are reinforcing that pattern more than any other time of year. So in a lot of ways, January is kind of the worst time to break it because your habit is most likely strongest because of the last 2-3 months of the holiday season. So that is why I am offering this free challenge, Break Up with Sugar But Still Be Friends challenge. in my Facebook group with the same name, Break Up with Sugar 2023, because I know how many of you have this goal, and I know how many of you are not prepared with the right brain-based tools to actually be successful this time. So I'm going to take you through that process over 2 weeks together. So like I said, go over to liapinnelli.com/sugar or go to my Facebook group, Break Up with Sugar 2023. So let's talk a little more about interrupting the pattern in order to break the habit. The first thing that you need to know about any pattern interrupt is that it doesn't freaking feel good, okay? It is uncomfortable to break a pattern. Our brains love patterns and they love habits because our brains are motivated by doing anything that takes very little effort. The reason for that is because Mother Nature knows for survival purposes, we need to conserve energy so that we can fight off, the lion that's chasing us, back in our, cave people days. But the thing is most of us are very lucky in that we don't live in those circumstances anymore. But our brain is still hardwired to not want to expend a whole bunch of energy for no good reason. So our brain is very, very good, very, very expert at taking anything that it starts to associate as a pattern. It's like, for example, pattern. I go for a walk. Even my dog has this, right? Me and my dog, we go for a walk every morning. Well, the first time we went for a walk, it wasn't a pattern yet, but then we went for a walk the next day and the next day and the next day. And eventually my brain figures out, oh, she's making a pattern out of this. I can relegate this pattern to her subconscious so that we no longer have to expend energy thinking about going for the walk. It just has become a habit. She's going to wake up, she's going to have her tea, she's going to write in her journal, she's going to put on her shoes, she's going to take the dog for a walk. It just like brushing your teeth. It just becomes a habit, something that you barely think about, if at all, and you're just doing it. You didn't even think about it. Well, our brains love to do that and really love to do that for anything that's giving you huge dopamine spikes. So of course your brain is like, here we are, holiday season, and I've had a little chocolate here, a little Kringle there, a little, eggnog here. We're having all of the sweets, and we think we're being quote unquote good because relative to the amount of sweets in the house, we're being really good, right? But we're having a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, a little bit there, a couple times a day, whatever it is, once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day. And the next thing you know, your brain very quickly and very easily, because dopamine is involved here, very quickly, very easily is like, ooh, this is a pattern. Let's make this subconscious. Let's save energy. So it gets relegated to your subconscious brain. And this is why it is a hard habit to break, because it's subconscious on some level and it's giving you tons of dopamine. Your brain doesn't want to stop anything that gives you tons of dopamine. Dopamine is what is released when people have a gambling habit or a shopping habit or a Facebook habit or a Netflix habit or a porn habit. I mean, this is dopamine in action. So it's really uncomfortable to pattern interrupt. And that's why most of us don't stick with it, because we're hardwired to avoid that discomfort and we're hardwired to move toward pleasure. So we get trapped. The trick is that you have to actually persevere for about 2 weeks for most of my clients in order to really get over the hump. But you've probably heard that before. That's probably not new. But here's what is new, is that we are far more successful to go through something uncomfortable if A, we know that there is freedom on the other side, that there is a huge benefit on the other side, which we've already talked about there is, but also if we do it in community. People are more likely to push through something if they do it in community. That's why we have marathon races, right? It's like, people will train for marathons and you might train on your own, but you're running with everybody else. It's that energy of locking arms with other people who are, commiserating with you. But also there is an actual method that I will be teaching in the challenge. It's more than I can teach here on the podcast. I will be going into it a bit on the next episode, part 2, but there is a method that you can use. And I'm going to share that with you. When you have the right method and you have the right support, you will be successful. And when I say the right support, I mean having a coach like me to take you through it and having a community to lock arms with. And there is ease and freedom on the other side. Now, I'm not telling you that if you have a coach and a community, and by the way, this is free, like I said, my challenge, but if you have a coach and a community, I'm not saying it's going to be easy. And I'm not saying it's going to feel great, but I'm saying you will be successful. You will be successful at breaking up with sugar and still getting to be friends. So let me tell you a little bit about the right method. And I will be going into detail on this on our next episode next week. So stay tuned for that. But there are two methods really to really breaking your sugar habit. The first method is that I've coined terms for this because most of my clients struggle with sugar. The first method I called the Band-Aid burn. And it's basically cold turkey. And I personally don't use the Band-Aid burn. This is not my method for breaking my sugar habit. And of course, I can develop a sugar habit again, but I can also break it very, very easily because I know exactly how it's done. But some of my clients prefer the Band-Aid burn, which is just to get it over with and just quit sugar altogether. And I always say this is a great method for people who really like those cold water plunges, or people who are like, I need to quit caffeine, so they just quit cold turkey and they don't like wean themselves. This is not me, but this might be you. And my method works. Even if you want to do it this way, what I'm going to teach you in that challenge is going to help you with the Band-Aid burn. The second approach that works for breaking your habit with sugar is what I call the weenie wean, meaning it's a slow wean for weenies. People who are like, I don't want the Band-Aid burn. I don't want to plunge my body into cold water. I don't want to quit caffeine all at once. This is the approach for you. It's a gentler approach for people who prefer to maybe, for me, whenever I was quitting caffeine, I would start by, using like 3/4 of my coffee would be caffeinated and then 1/4 would be decaf. And little by little, I would reverse those ratios until I was down to decaf. It's very similar method with the weenie wean. But don't worry, you're actually going to kick sugar in our challenge. So just because it's a slower approach doesn't mean it's not effective. So I encourage you to let yourself be successful this year. Come on over. It's a free challenge where I'm going to walk you through both of these methods, the Band-Aid burn and the weenie wean, and give you all of the support that you need to get through that 2-week hump. And the best part is I'm going to teach you how to be friends with sugar after, because we know that abstinence doesn't work for most of us. Saying I'm never going to eat sugar again doesn't work for most of us. And if you're anything like most of my clients, we can be very black and white in our thinking. It's like either I have sugar or either I eat all the sugar or I eat no sugar, right? And that neither one of those approaches works for most of us. And so that's why I encourage you to come on over and learn. There is a better way. There is a better method, and you can do it with a bunch of really better women who are going to do this challenge with you over in the Break Up with Sugar challenge. So let's recap what we've talked about today. There is nothing wrong with you. If you have a sugar habit and you don't want to have that sugar habit, but you have struggled to break the sugar habit, there is nothing wrong with you. Habits form very easily because we are hardwired to form habits, and they can be broken, and you will be more successful in breaking this habit, and you will break it more quickly and more easily if you use a brain-based pattern interrupt method. Okay, everybody, much love to you all, and I hope to see you in the Break Up with Sugar and Still Be Friends challenge.
You've been listening to The Life You Crave. I lost 30 pounds years ago without dieting, willpower, or deprivation. I'm on a mission to help other women, including you, do the same. You can book a free weight loss strategy session with me over at liapinnelli.com. That's liapinnelli.com. See you on our next call or on the next episode. And remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment on iTunes.